Hi guys, today I wanted to talk to you about how I got into the nightclub industry. And this is really a love letter to the nightclub industry. And we know it's suffering at the moment very, very badly. It's an endangered species, really. I wanted to go to a happier time. I wanted to talk to you about how I fell in love with clubbing. That came before I started working in the industry, right? If we want to talk about how I made a career in nightclubs, we need first to talk about clubbing. And then before that, we need to talk about electronic music and my love for it. Let's go for that. A love letter to clubbing and the clubbing industry and how I ended up making a career out of it. It started at a very young age, actually, in the 80s when Renault was very little and everything was black and white. Toward the mid 80s, electronic music started going to the forefront, especially Chicago house, and in Belgium we had Belgian new beat. Now, Belgium had an oversized impact on electronic music, and it really dominated the clubbing scene and the electronic music scenes, say from the late 80s to the late 90s, early 2000s. It was uncanny. Super clubs were born in Belgium, after parties, late 80s, early 90s in Belgium. It was crazy. Already by the late 80s, you had a very strong foundation for clubbing culture with its own dress code and codes, and the impact on the population was immense. I think if you want to explore that topic, which I find very interesting, there are a couple of things you can watch, you can search for online. The first one is a documentary called TSOB, The Sound of Belgium, which is all about new beat and then what followed straight after, so late 80s, early 90s, and how the Belgium and Belgian producers were the forefront of in the early days of electronic music, and how the clubbing industry just went into overdrive and over the top at that time. Another documentary you can watch, and it's available for free on YouTube, is Bonsai Record, the story. It's actually a documentary financed by Red Bull, believe it or not, and they explain how what started with a group of mates running a record shop ended up turning this record shop into a record label, Bonsai Record, which became one of the best known electronic music record label in the world. And it shows all the excesses of the early 90s and to mid 90s in Belgium, and how clubbing was an integral part of the culture where I grew up. So 85, 86, I'm a little, I don't know, 7, 8-year-old kid, and I hear those beats, that music on radio station. I'm like, oh my God, it didn't sound like anything else you'd ever heard before. And you couldn't switch the television on. I mean, parents would always put the news on in the evening, right? And there wasn't a single day without the media disparaging the industry and the music, the culture. I think both the media and the politicians, the establishment, we shall call them, I think the establishment was scared of what was in a sense the last cultural revolution, really, the last youth revolution we've seen. They were scared of it, and therefore they had never anything good to say about it. It was all about the drugs and the troubles, and there was never anything positive about it. And the more the establishment rebelled against it, the more people rebelled against the establishment. I'd go to school 8, 9, and you could get your hands on tapes that had been recorded live in nightclubs. And I know it's sort of a Belgian thing, because I used to do it 10 years later in France. Right? It was a way for DJs to make a bit of cash in hand, give him a tenner, and he'd record a tape or later on burn a CD for you live during the night and then give it to you. And you'd go home and you'd make copies, and all your mates wanted some, and then the little brother would get some, and that's how age 8 or 9 I was actually exposed to the clubbing industry. I'd get those tapes atrocious quality, every single one of them. I don't know what happened, but probably copied 2,000 times. But you get those steps with electronic music mixed in a live environment, and you could hear the DJ talking over the music, and you could hear the crowd in the background going mental. And I was like, oh my God, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this. And every time the news were like, oh, another rave in a field or a disused factory, and you'd see people, unsing and doofing, and I was like, that looks so cool. And yeah, I grew up loving that music, and I could not wait to be of an age to go clubbing. And thankfully in Belgium, at the time, you could go clubbing relatively legally, relatively young. You could go clubbing with anybody over the age of 18. It didn't really matter what age you were. If you were with somebody over the age of 18, you could gain access to a club. You didn't even have to be related to that person. And that was the legal aspect. Now, in practice, people from the age of 14 onward could gain access to clubs relatively easily, unescorted. Wasn't it great though? Like late 80s, early 90s parenting. I mean, when our parents were strict, they were strict, but there were other things like, where are you going? It's midnight. I'm going clubbing. Oh, it's fine. Enjoy your night. It's mental. Imagine that now. Anyway, so my first clubbing experience wasn't as glamorous, shall we say. I went clubbing with my stepfather. That was my first clubbing experience. And we went to a restaurant, we had a good meal, went to the cinema, and on the way back to the little village where I used to live, just on the outskirts of that village, there was a nightclub. And he just parked the car and was like, come on, let's go and have a beer. I was like, what? And I had a beer, and I was dancing. I think I must have been 13, 14. And the first track I ever danced to, 1993, Robin S., Love for Love. That's my first steps on the dance floor, right? First clubbing experience, fantastic, loved it. And I couldn't wait to do it all over again. And we did it all over again. I think that year, New Year's Eve, I was allowed to go unescorted with a friend of mine to that nightclub till 1:30 in the morning. Then we moved to France, and that's really where my clubbing years started. For two reasons. The first reason is, the first couple of years we were in France, we'd go back to Belgium 2-3 times a year. And my parents left me in Belgium completely unsupervised. I could start friends. And therefore I would spend every single night clubbing. Once a quarter in Belgium for 4, 5, 6 days. I don't think I'd sleep. I'd be clubbing all the time. And then in France itself, I mean, we moved into the French Alps, and we moved right next to one of the biggest nightclubs in Europe. What were the odds? Macumba, right on the border with Switzerland. And yeah, that was something. I don't think young guys would relate if I talk about it. I don't think they'd get as excited as I would. Try and imagine one of the biggest car park you've ever seen. In the middle of it, a huge structure, 3 restaurants within that structure, and 12 different rooms. Every single one of those rooms was a nightclub. Every single one of those rooms had a bespoke decoration, theme, genre of music, and audience or demographics target. Privately owned company, 120 staff, open 7 days a week. Over the weekend, it was open till 6 o'clock in the morning, and the club had several entrances and several exits, right? And the club had bakeries built near those exits, so people could pick up their breakfast on their way home after having spent a night clubbing. Just mental, absolutely mental. That club ran successfully for over 30 years. Imagine that. I was clubbing there and I was like a little sponge absorbing absolutely everything. I was like, wow, that club is one of the templates I try to follow throughout my career. And one of the reasons was there was always something going on in the club. There were always theme night. It was event and content led. Now, if you've gone clubbing recently, you can see where it's gone wrong, right? Anyway, so Macumba, I'd go there anytime I could. Time of my life, very expensive time of my life. One of those nights we went there with a friend of mine because they had a theme night. It was all about electronic music in every room for once. Right? They had dozens and dozens of guest DJs. And we're like, one of them was one of my favorite DJ, a Belgian DJ called Yves de Ruyter. Yves de Ruyter was one of the DJs from Bonsai Records in Belgium. And he was producing trance and progressive trance. And that was my jam, and hard trance and hard house. And I was in all those waters. Anyway, so he said, we're going to go and we're going to watch him. And it was a long wait. We had to sit through 4 or 5 hours of other guest DJs playing industrial techno. Now, don't get me wrong. I love techno. I love techno because techno is unpretentious. Techno is the foundation of electronic music. And then to make other genres, you kind of embellish, push it up, right? You add things, but techno is pure. It's unvarnished, unpretentious. It's the essence of electronic music. I like it. 4 or 5 hours in a row is a bit much for me, right? Everything's subjective. And by the time Yves de Ruyter's set was about to start, about 4 o'clock in the morning, the atmosphere had gone completely flat in the main room. So the main room was full, but nobody was on the dance floor, nobody was dancing. You had clumps of people chilling, talking. It was very flat. And he had to look around, and he went through his fly case. Remember fly cases? He went through his fly case and he pulled a vinyl out of it. Remember vinyls? And the first track he played was a very popular and a very commercial track in a night where you hadn't heard a single commercial popular track. It was Dahul, Meet Her at a Love Parade. And he tapped that on and everyone just went, oh, what's going on? What? Oh. And that's it. As the DJ, he gained the attention of the room like that. And he proceeded to follow that act by an hour of 3 decks mixing. The man was a fucking god. By the time he was done, it was about 5, 5:15. The room was heaving. He had drawn crowds from all the other rooms. The main room was bouncing. You could not find any space. The whole crowd was jumping, screaming. If you didn't ever watch, you could have guessed it was about 1:30 in the morning, maximum. But no, it was 5 o'clock in the morning. The man had woken up that night and saved it. And my mate and I were like, oh my God, look what he's doing. He had that crowd there, right there in the palm of his hands. And we're like, we want to do this. We went home, we're like, we've got to do this. We've got to become DJs, right? Yves de Ruyter made me want to become a DJ. So that summer we worked really hard in factories. And remember when kids used to work during school holidays? We worked really hard in factories and we saved up some money and we bought decks. And then we bought mixers and vinyls and we're like, hey, I'm a DJ now. I wasn't, but I thought I was. Anyway, and that was it. I was spending far too much time at Macumba, and then I started visiting some other clubs around, and I found another good club, completely the opposite of Macumba in terms of size and scope and content. But a fantastic night out, and that club was called Club 96. So while Macumba was down in the valley by the Swiss border, it was a super club. Probably one of the biggest. It was one of the biggest nightclubs in Europe. Club 96 was a one-room affair, and it was in the basement of a shop. I'm not joking. You accessed that nightclub through a side staircase going under a shop. It was in a shop's basement. It was all up a town. It's a well-known town. It's a very posh town called Megève. So it's a very posh town and winter holiday resort in the Alps. The French Alps are not well deserved by public transport. So to go clubbing there, you had to take your car and drive up a mountain road, little hairpins and things, all the way to Megève. And then obviously you'd be drinking. And then you had to try and drive back down the same mountain road through the same hairpins, preferably not missing one, because then you'd get back down the valley much, much faster, but potentially dead. And so that nightclub shouldn't have been popular and shouldn't have worked, but it worked for one thing. Chris, the DJ. Chris was an immensely talented young man who was also immensely lazy and unambitious. His loss was the win of the club owner, I suppose, and all of the clubbers. That man lived in a caravan in the garden of his mom's house because his bedroom had been turned into a studio. That man was entering DJing competitions and remixing competitions, producing competitions for the fun of it, and would always end up somehow on the podium. He had clubs and record labels contacting him regularly, going, hey, do you want to work for us? But he was more than happy to live in his caravan on his mom's lawn and work in the local nightclub, cash in hand. And so that was always a very, very good night. The music he was playing and how he was playing it, the atmosphere he was creating in there. People would take the risk and drive up that mountain and spend the night there and then try and drive down and get down back into the valley alive. It was crazy. Every time I'd go there, I'd be like, hey, can you play this track? Can you play that track? And he'd be like, how do you know it? Like, that is literally a white label. It went through my letterbox last week. I was like, wow, I was at Macumba yesterday. They played it. The crowd went mental. I asked the DJ, One day we got chatting and he was like, do you want to become my light jockey? I was like, what the hell is that? And he explained to me, right? I was like, a light jockey is somebody who programs the lights and lasers in the club. And he matches the music to the light, and he uses the different light pattern and movement and colors to match the music and enhance or create a mood or an atmosphere in the club. And I was like, that sounds fantastic. Yeah. And I was like, I've always wanted to work in a nightclub. I'm a DJ. It was like, you're a DJ? I was like, yeah, I'm a DJ. It was like, well, fantastic. I tell you what, why don't you come next Saturday, 7 o'clock, we'll have a McDonald's and then I'll show you the club behind the scenes. We'll open it together and then I'll show you how the lights work and you can show me your DJing skills. And I was like, whoop, I'll be there. And I was. And he showed me, we opened the club together and it was a revelation. I mean, I fell in love with absolutely every single small task there was to do. Like switching that huge stack of amps, click, 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 and you can hear the fans kicking in and you're like, whoa, something's going on. And then you just flick 3 or 4 big switches and the whole lighting rig comes on and all those moving mirrors and moving heads start clicking. I was like, wow. It was like being in a spaceship. And he was like, okay, show me your DJing skills. We're going to warm up the amps. And he played a couple of tracks and it was like, your turn. And I just did a fade in, fade out. And I just went, well, voila. And I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, you didn't beat match. It wasn't synced. The 2 tracks didn't even, they weren't even the same kind of genre. And it was like, you told me you're DJ. I was like, I've just done it in front of you. I've just DJed in front of you, like in front of your very eyes. Are you not entertained? And he's like, okay, so you're not a DJ. It was like, we're going to have a problem then, because if you don't know about rhythm, you're not going to be a good light jockey. And so we learned to count to 4, up to 4, and then up to 16. Right? And over the next few weeks, he taught me about how to DJ and gave me tips to go home and practice. And I became his main light jockey because he offered me a job I couldn't refuse. He just went, "Do you want to be my light jockey?" I was like, "Okay, what's the deal?" He was like, "Well, we can't give you any money, but you can get a jacket with the name of the club on the back." And he had me right there and then. Like, everything after that was the bonus. It was like, and you can drink as much as alcohol as you want when you're on shift with me in the DJ box. And my parents were not very impressed with my negotiating skills. I don't know why. They were like, "What do you mean you get a free jacket and free alcohol? Like, how much you earning?" I was like, "Nothing." He said that if I really like a record, he can get it from me. And they were like, "What?" To put things back into perspective, at the time I was at uni, and my parents expected me to come out of university graduating with a degree in business. So obviously, when I told them that I intended to work free of charge every Thursday, Friday, Saturday in a nightclub on my last year of uni, they were not thrilled. Don't know why. And I mean, it was wild. It was wild. I'd be at uni on a Thursday, and then I'd take a 20-minute train journey back home, wash, get change, eat, and then I would hitchhike to the next valley, and then hitchhike from that valley to Megève. I'd work my Thursday night shift in the club. The doorman would bring me down in the morning back down the valley, give me a lift. I'd pop by a bakery, get some croissant, go straight to school, go back to uni Friday, right? Spend my day in class, trying not to fall asleep. Train journey home, wash, get change, eat, swallow a whole box of Pro Plus, hitchhike, do my Friday night. Doorman would drop me back down the valley, hitchhike home, sleep the whole Saturday, do the same on Saturday night, go back for my Saturday night shift in the club. Doorman would drop me back on Sunday, hitchhike from one valley to another. My parents were going mental. Me, I was loving life. I did my first few sets as a warm-up DJ, and managing to get people to dance is something. And working in tandem with a DJ and managing to create an atmosphere and get a reaction from a crowd is something. And I was just loving it. And I even loved the chores that came before and after. Something clubbers don't see, but all the preparation before you open and all the cleaning up when you close down. And I loved that. I loved how quirky it was also. I mean, it was a dingy little nightclub in a basement, no ventilation. It was so hot sometimes. It looked like a water pipe had burst. You had condensation running down the walls. It was just so hot in there. You had to open emergency exits to try and ventilate. Because we're up a mountain, we try and sober people up before sending them back on their drive back down home in the valley. So when we stopped the music at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, we'd give them free breakfast. Every person who was still in that club at the time would get a pain au chocolat and a cup of coffee kind of thing, or a ham sandwich and a coffee. And then we'd send them on their way home, and then the cleaning would start, and everyone in the club had a zone to clean in the nightclub. And by the time we were done with that, we'd all sit back at the bar and the owners would give us breakfast. And it was always, welcome to France, baguette, pâté, cheese with orange juice and coffee. And so we'd have our pâté baguette at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. And then we'd go home. And that was shift done. And I'd go home knackered, or I'd go back to class knackered, and I could not wait to go back for my next shift. And that was really the foundation of how I ended up working in nightclubs. I stopped working in that club for a while, ended up moving to England in 2001, didn't speak a word of English, so what are you gonna do? It was a chicken factory, all nightclubs, and I tried the Chicken Factory for 2 weeks and it definitely wasn't for me. So nightclubs. 7th of October 2001, I became a glass collector in a nightclub called Tokyo Joe's in a town called Preston in Lancashire. And Tokyo Joe's was one of the flagship of Lumina Leisure, and I worked my way through all the ranks within Lumina Leisure. So I did glass collector supervisor, cloakroom attendant, kitchen attendant, receptionist, cleaner, floor supervisor, floor manager, trainee assistant manager, senior assistant manager, deputy manager, general manager designate. That's when they want to give you all the responsibilities but not the salary. And then general manager. And I loved every minute of it. I've gone home frustrated, tired, angry a fair few times, but I'd always look forward to go back. They were the best years of my life. And it really makes me sad for the state of the clubbing industry today. This is, by the way, the first video in a series of videos that will be dedicated to clubbing. And the next video will be about what I see as the root causes of why the clubbing industry is in terminal decline. And there are many root causes, and a lot of them are addressed on a regular basis in the specialized press and on television and in the newspapers, and a lot of them are very much valid. But one that is never ever mentioned is how the clubbing industry killed itself. The clubbing industry shot itself in the foot because after the financial crisis 2008-2010, there was an overwhelming focus away from the core business of nightclubbing, which is entertainment. And they focused away from entertainment to focus solely on immediate return on investment, pre-booked revenues, retail. And they forgot that nightclubs are supposed to be fun places to go. They must be event-led, themed-led, music-led. It has to be a fun night out. Things have got to happen. You need to give people things to talk about when they go home. And if all you do is trying to get a maximum of money out of them before they've ever even stepped foot into your club, and then the only experience you give them throughout the night is a bedroom DJ playing generic music and a girl in a bikini top bringing you a bottle with a sparkler on top, you're not running a nightclub. You are running an overly loud, expensive and obnoxious alcohol supermarket. I understand as a businessman, retail is important. If you do your entertainment bit right, if you do your event, your content right, people will come to your club because it is fun. They will have fun. They will drink. If you have the right policies in place at the bar to follow, and even for your PBR and so on, you will make money. Retail will follow. But entertainment is the locomotive, not retail. And I think that's one of the main reasons why clubbing is not that fun anymore and why not that many people go out anymore. There are many other reasons, but I think that's one of those. But yes, that was my love letter to the clubbing industry. That was my love letter to clubbing. I miss it. I miss it dearly. And I'm really in two minds as to, I'm getting old a bit, but I'm like, should I go in for one last ride? Should I just get the opportunity, if given, and take over a nightclub and show young pups how old wolves used to do, and show people around that you can still make money running a nightclub? Not only that, but having fun doing so, and your staff having fun doing so, and your customers having fun being in your venue. It's a tempting route to follow. We'll see. But thanks for sitting this one out with me and watch me waffle on about the good old days again. And I'll speak to you next time.